Hey everyone, my name is Cohen. I'm founder and CEO of Terra Education Technologies. I'm really excited for another episode of our Visionary School Founder Series. Today I am with Antonio Parks, the founder of Georgia Leadership Academy. It's a new charter school that's in the process of getting approval and opening down here in Georgia, which we're always proud to represent because we're based in Atlanta too. Antonio, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting. I know you have a very interesting backstory, and you come very highly recommended. So I'm excited to hear what you have in mind for Georgia Leadership Academy. And the first question we always like to ask school founders, because founding a school, in terms of the list of hardest things to do on the planet, I honestly think founding a school would be very high up there. And I've been founded multiple organizations, but seeing how schools get founded is a whole nother ball game. So I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about yourself and what in your story led to this vision for Georgia Leadership Academy.
Yeah, I definitely would put it on the list of one of the most difficult things to do. My name is Antonio Parks. I was born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia. I attended Albany State University, where I was a dual major, middle grades education, math, science, and special ed. Before I became a dual major in education, I was a bio major because I wanted to go into pharmacy.
Yeah,
I wanted to be a pharmacist, and that was strictly because I was good at math and science, and I wanted to make a lot of money.
right.
But I started to do this program where we would tutor students after school, and I had a fourth grade student, and I realized how behind he was in school, and I really felt like it was criminal that his teachers knew and the school system knew that he was this far behind, and they weren't doing anything intentional to close those gaps. So that day I went and I changed my major, and I got into education knowing that I wanted to open a school because I knew that the systemic change that I wanted to make I wouldn't have that locus of control in the classroom. So when people ask me, how long have I been working on Georgia Leadership Academy? How long have I thought about opening a school? It's been well over a decade. I think I was probably like 18 or 19. And then when I first realized that like this has to happen, and we're here now. So that's how it originally came about. And we've had a lot of iterations of the name, the process, but the vision has been there.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's rare to hear somebody with that early in your career, or even the start of your career, before your career even started, you had that vision. And that's so powerful, especially because building a school is such an integral part of any community, that it has so many more things to consider, and that deep thought and letting it marinate, and also getting some experience to inform how you do this, I'm sure is super helpful. I had a similar experience actually to you, what you described, the fourth grade student, but when I was a teacher, I was teaching ninth grade, and I remember we were doing, I was teaching world history or 10th grade world history, and one of my students, it was clear that she could not read for comprehension. She was only reading for fluency, and she was still doing kind of block letters writing wise. And again, I had a similar thought to you. It's like, how did we arrive at this point, right? And I'm curious, having had that experience, what did you do after that experience? So what have the years leading up to this included for you career wise? And then how has your perspective changed on what leads students to get in that position, if it's changed at all?
Oh man, I'm trying to break down that
question. Let's start with so you had this moment where you decided, I want to get an education, switch your major, and then what happened after that?
Yeah, so every position I got after that was to prepare me to be in this position. Every position I took. And when I tell the story, some people will say that my path was, what do they say? Fast track. I fast tracked. I had a fast track process, which I could agree, but I was very intentional.
So I don't know, 10 years, it's not that fast, right?
No,
that's real work.
So I'll break it down, and you'll see why I say fast
Okay.
track. So I became a paraprofessional in Albany, Georgia, because at this time, this is a crazy story. So my professor, she would, okay, when we came into Albany State, you could take your GACE the same year you were doing your student teaching, right?
Okay.
And that was cool because you were doing your student teaching. You could take
Yeah.
your GACE and you could pass it and you can move forward.
Right.
In the midst of me being there, they changed that rule to where you had to pass your GACE first, and then you get to go into your student teaching. So I had to initially take a gap because I took some time out to join the military. So I came back from the military, so I had to take a gap. I had to take time before I could do my student teaching. And during that time, I became a paraprofessional at Radium Springs Middle, and I learned a lot from teachers and all of those things. So after I graduated, I moved to Denver, and I taught for. This is where the fast track began. So I taught for 2 years, and then I became 3 years, and then I became a year zero assistant principal. So a lot of people were confused, like, how did I become an assistant principal in 3 years? But what I tell people, I went into that interview sharing my vision. Like, I went into the interview authentic. I went into the interview saying every position that I obtain is to learn and to grow. So I don't have a desire to be in the classroom for forever. I value what's happening in the classroom, but what I need to learn is not necessarily what I can learn while being a teacher. So I always wanted to be in leadership positions. So after 3 years of teaching, I became an assistant principal, a year zero assistant principal. And I started to learn a lot about leadership. And a year, and if for people who don't know, a year zero assistant.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that.
Yeah, so it's your principalship or your assistant principalship when you're opening a school. So we had an opportunity to turn around in a school. So this was a failing elementary school, and they were turning the school around. So they had to rehire all of the teachers, rehire the administrative staff, bring community in and see what the community wanted. And I was a part of that process. And I became the assistant principal there. And that's where my leadership journey started. I was an assistant principal for 2 years, which is what I needed to learn, like, the ecosystem of leadership in a building. After those 2 years, I went to the district level where I became a part of the superintendent's, like, that cabinet, that team. And we worked with the school. I worked with about 23 schools, 26 schools around culturally relevant education and pedagogy and disparity data, and how we can put policies in place to address that. And then in that process, I had the opportunity to open another charter school in Colorado. And then I moved back home to Georgia when I'm in the process of opening school. So everything was intention to get back here. And I had an opportunity to open another school in Colorado before I left. But I genuinely just felt like it was time for me to come back home. Everything I did in Colorado was to learn, grow, and develop so that I can come back home in my community and do what I've always visioned.
That makes sense.
That was about 7 years. So that part is the part that it was like fast track. I went from a classroom teacher to
well, I may be in the minority here, but I don't believe in, like, I think that sounds like a perfect amount of time. We don't have time to wait here. We need people with ideas to start. We need to start doing it. Like, you're not the first. I had the same thought. I think a lot of teachers have a thought at some point of what it would like to be a school leader, let alone start a school. And, my initial thought when I was teaching, and I didn't teach for that long, but was, I should teach for at least 5, 6, 7 years before I do it. And talking to veteran teachers when I was thinking about that, they were like, "Oh, you don't need to do that. Like, don't wait. Like, we don't have time for this. Like, if you're that ambitious and you have a vision, and you're willing to learn, go for it." So, I appreciate that drive that you have. And also, again, it's a theme that's coming up in all these interviews. It's like everybody who's starting a school came from a charter school past and have seen it done in different ways. You're unique in the sense that you've also had a different altitude. Like, you were at the district level too, which most folks that I've talked with in these interviews have not had that experience. So going back to my question about the fourth grader, what I was trying to say, and I didn't do it very well, was, okay, so now that you're, 10 years ahead, right? And you've had the teaching experiences, you had the leadership experience, you had the district experiences. When you look back at that experience with the fourth grader who wasn't on grade level or close to it, it sounds like, what do you see were the factors that led to that from your vantage point today? Did it change over time as you got more into the system?
Yeah, absolutely. I think education has developed over the last decade, but what I would say then is that data-driven instruction wasn't as valuable or utilized during that time.
Sure.
So people really didn't or weren't using data to drive their instruction, knowing like, okay, this is where a certain group of students are. Here are the interventions that we can put in place to ensure that they meet grade level or catch up, or we're at least closing gaps. And how do we even use classroom data to make sure that we're hitting those benchmarks to make sure the students are successful? So I think from a systems for that, and I don't place blame on the student or the teacher. I really just feel like it's a systemic thing. He was
Absolutely
a part of a system that pushed him through, no matter what he needed, the supports that he may have needed, he was not receiving that. And I think a systems level, we missed it because we didn't know how to dive into the data. We were really focused on that one test at the end of the year. And by that point, he's already on his way to fifth grade. And now that gap has widened. So I think over that decade later, or 12, 13 years later, leaders have really learned how to dive deep into data and coach teachers on how to use that data in the classroom to make sure that we're having academic gains in a way that'll close gaps for students.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. It's weird to say out loud that we weren't using data to drive instruction until recently, but it's just kind of the truth, right? It was very much like, all right, let's look at the data after everything happens, see how did we do. It was sort of like, all right, these are the results, but we didn't. Now, formative assessments are very prevalent, like everything, exit tickets every day, that kind of stuff. I think that's a great point. It's also the challenge with the system as it is like, there's not a huge incentive. In fact, there's a lot of disincentives to hold students up and really make sure they're on grade level, because they gotta socially, they gotta continue on. And obviously we don't want to keep them in school forever. So it's like, all right, well, if they get a little behind here, they'll be fine. But each of those adds up over time, right? And that's how this gap forms, which is well documented at this point. So with that in mind, at Terra, we care a ton about teachers, and we feel like, and I don't need to say this to you or really anybody, teachers are having a tough time right now. And it's always been a challenge to be a teacher, but it's never been more challenging than today. So curious what do you feel like the biggest challenges facing teachers in today's sort of education system are? And then as you continue to ideate and develop Georgia Leadership Academy, how do you plan on taking those challenges and trying to address them for the teachers that you end up hiring at your school?
So oddly enough, and this I was actually surprised when this came up. Teachers, what I've done over this last 2-3 years, I've had an opportunity to talk to teachers post-pandemic. So we already knew teacher retention was an issue prior to the pandemic, but now it seems like it's starting to become even more of an issue or concern, and teachers are extremely burnt out. So what we have done at Georgia Leadership Academy is we have started to really consider a balanced school year calendar, and what that is year-round school. So when you initially hear year-round school, people are like, no, absolutely not. I don't get enough breaks, right? And then when I started to talk to teachers, and the teachers that knew what year-round school was, they really advocated for that, because around every 9 weeks, you get 10 to 14 days to really reset. And teachers now are at a place like that is a lot more manageable than waiting for the quote unquote big breaks. And researchers have shown, like, when teachers are burnt out, students are typically burnt out. If teachers aren't at 100%, they can't show up for students.
Yeah,
And again, I don't put that weight on the teacher. I think that's a systems thing.
sure.
And we're not putting teachers in position to be successful. And if we're not putting teachers in positions to be successful, then they're not able to put students in positions to be successful without doing some type of harm to themselves, whether that's like a sleep, time, deprivation of food, all of these things, right? So I feel like that mental health piece is what's lacking in education. So the first thing we would like to do is offer a balanced school year, and definitely not take away, but look at that 11 weeks of a summer break, cutting that down to 8. So you'll still get your summer break, you'll still get the big holidays, but you'll get more of these consistent breaks throughout the year. I mean, I genuinely just think that'll help with some of that mental health and pressure that's happening.
Yeah.
Because it's
Yeah.
what I also believe what has happened in the last 10 years. We were not using data a decade ago, and now we're using data so much that teachers have all of these things coming at them and all of these things on their plate. So we were far left at first, now we're too far right. And I think we're finally getting to a place to learn how to balance and do that well. Smaller classrooms. Studies have just always shown teachers are happier, students are happier, academic gains happen when we're in a smaller classroom. So we're pushing a 15-to-1 student to teacher ratio. And then a lot of the things, because we're a school that really encourage curiosity, we want to personalize learning. So a lot of our partnerships offer that, and one of them being paper, one of them being Teach to One Math. And that paper it's a 24-hour one-on-one tutoring program for students that can be utilized in the classroom when teachers are doing small group instruction, or they're trying to differentiate their instruction. That is to help students who may not be at grade level, but we don't take up grade level time and classroom time to address it. While those things may seem really small, I think it takes the weight and the pressure off of teachers so that they can actually go in and offer that quality instruction. They have time to actually plan the quality instruction. They have supports in place to help them get students to where they need to be. So I think, and just being able to show up and listen consistently will be a game changer for teachers. Our vision is to provide a quality and intentional educational experience. And that doesn't just go for students, that's also for our teachers. So when we hear and see and feel that there's something happening and within the ecosystem of the school and the ecosystem of education, we really sit down and brainstorm on how can we address it. And I don't see that changing ever. So in the next 5 years, if something else is on the market and something else is happening, I do believe that education should be adaptable, and we should be flexible to meet the needs of teachers and students and families.
Yeah, no, I love that. I mean, you said a lot there, and I think the first founder I've talked to who's going the year-round route, which from a personal perspective, I'm actually very open, and that's kind of what I think people should go to too. Because part of what I think folks don't understand, the common pop culture perception of teachers is, oh, they got this big break during the summer, so what's the problem? But the problem is that the condensing of the rest of the year, it just ramps everything up pressure-wise. Like I had to, as a world history teacher, I don't think people appreciate it. I was supposed to teach 10,000 years of history in 6 months? And it's just absurd. It's an absurd task. And a year is not going to do it either. We got to work what we're supposed to be focusing on. But that comes from a history lover's perspective. But I think the part of this, to your point, is how can we make the profession itself more sustainable and less like, every teacher is in survival mode as soon as the year starts. Those first 4 weeks might seem good, but eventually you you can't keep up with the pace. It's like running on a treadmill at top speed. The first 2 minutes you can do it, but at a certain point you're gonna start tripping, and then it just gets to be, how can I make it through? And that's when quality falls off and wellness falls off. So I think that's really smart, and I'm anxious to see how people respond to it, because it is different. But it sounds
surprisingly, teachers, we host community co-design meetings every month where we bring in teachers, community members, families, And teachers have really, the teachers that we have on the team, they have really brought it to my attention. And I was like, okay, I had this thought.
Hey,
Great.
okay. Yeah,
And
that's
same
great.
thing with looping and all of those things. So there are a lot of things that are surfacing at GLA that I'll be honest, I was shocked, but I'm definitely for.
Yeah.
Definitely for.
Well, it's good to know you're going through like a genuine design process. And again, I think we're dispelling a lot of misconceptions about teachers for folks, is that teachers, we want to work, we love what we do, and we're trying to improve. It's the system that oftentimes prevents us from doing so. So that's why I've always loved the concept of charter schools, albeit not all of them are done well, obviously, but it's meant to be at its core a place where we try stuff, right? We try to reinvent while giving the community we work with a better opportunity for their kids, or at least another option. With that, you're early in this process from a formality perspective, but we know, as you said, you've been thinking about this for a while. But knowing how many charter schools inspire their own teachers to go on and become charter founders, I always like to ask, for any aspiring founders out there, what advice might you give, given how much thought you've put into this and now where you are in the beginning of the formal process?
I think the biggest thing I would say to any potential school leader or school founder is to, and it's so cliche, but I'll break it down, but to hold, not even just remember your why, but to hold on to your why. Even in the charter world, there will be times where you will have an opportunity to do something different, and you will have an opportunity to perpetuate. And you have to make a conscious effort and a conscious decision to do something different, because if you fall in the loop of perpetuating, we will only get the same results. So I had to really shift my mind and accept that if we get denied, we are going to put forward the most authentic charter application. Because if we put forward the most authentic charter application, what the community wanted, what students wanted, what teachers wanted, if we get denied, we'll be able to live at night, because we know we went into this with something different. We went into it as authentic, as raw, and as intentional as we wanted. And I think we'll be able to live with that. What I realized is we would not be able to live with is if we started to change our model to perpetuate what people are already doing, or what other schools and districts are already doing, and we still get denied. That's something we wouldn't be able to live with, because like, I didn't even want to do this. I just did this so that because I thought that this is what would get me in the door. And I think it's really easy to fall in that trap, is to try to do things that you think will get you approved.
Right.
So approval is not the, I would say, don't make approval the goal. And that sounds insane. I know it sounds insane, but the goal should be to really create something authentic and genuine in response to what the community has called for. So any school founder, I would tell them to hold on to that why. Don't make the charter approval the only goal, because you will get lost in that process, and you'll realize you start to rebuild something new, but you're using the same pieces from the old system.
I mean, I've had the privilege of doing a lot of work with entrepreneurs in a lot of spaces, as we talked about before we hopped on here. And this is a similar problem for founders of anything. You have this vision to address a void that you see. And then as you get into it, everybody you talk to has their own ideas, has their own thoughts. Then you look at, okay, where are the milestones in schools? It's about, building your board, getting a petition in, getting approved, getting renewed. And each one of those steps can and will start pulling you in different directions. And to your point, most folks project onto you and your school their own life experience. And that's just what we all do as humans, right? Like you project what you think based off everything that you've experienced. And but this is one of the things I wish was more prevalent in education. It's like to be a leader
Mm-hmm.
and a visionary one at that, but even just a leader, you have to be willing to lead, right? Step
Mm-hmm.
out there and be that first person to say, no, trust me, this is the
Yep.
way to go, and get people to follow you. I think today we live in a world where politically, there's a lot going on, and we have a
Mm-hmm.
lot of leaders who just look to affirm what everybody else tells
Yep.
them.
Yep.
And that's not how we're going to make it out of here, right?
Yeah.
Like we need new ideas and new visions, and it's going to put you out on an island. But the
Yeah, for
goal isn't
sure.
to please everyone. The goal is to make a meaningful impact for the community that you serve. And I
Yeah.
think that's always a challenge as a founder. You want everybody to believe in what you're doing and every part of it, but it's never going to happen, right? But you
Mm-hmm.
got to have that North Star, that why, and really just go after it.
Because you'll be told no a lot more times than you will be told yes.
Oh
And
yeah.
it is very daunting at times
Yeah.
when you apply for a grant and you're like, I know, I got it.
You start
And they're
on
just
grants.
like, no. They're like,
Yeah.
no. And it
Right.
makes you feel like, okay, if I just change this a little bit, then and you realize all of those little tweaks and those little
Yeah.
changes become massive to the
Right.
idea that you had. And it's like, okay, I have to become so okay with hearing no, and so okay with like, no, not right now.
Yeah.
To the point to where it don't phase you.
Yeah.
When you hear no, you're like, okay, cool. I cannot. And it's such a delicate balance, like it's such a delicate thing because it happens so small. It happens in meetings, it happens in conversations, it happens when you receive those no emails. You
Yeah.
slowly start to change your model, and
Right.
it
It's
does
the
get
little
lonely.
tweaks. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then before you know it, you're pointing in a different direction.
You're like, and that's why when you're putting your board together, when I talk to my board, and recently we've been having these conversations because we have started to make some of those changes. And when we go too far, somebody on the team always has to say, whoa, 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 hey, hold up. This is not who we designed to be. This is not why we started. And we have to have a conversation and bring ourselves back. So having a strong board will help with that, because it's easy. I'm telling you, it's so easy to kind of just drift off and perpetuate what's already happening. You won't realize until it's too late.
Yeah. And I've had board members of past things I've been a part of play that same role. And that's why that structure is so important, to have people that are bought into you and bought into the vision and understand what that means, because that's why they're there, right? They're there to ideally help you shepherd this thing and keep that North Star in your sights. So I think that's such a powerful point. A lot of people, when you get into the formalities, you think, oh, I need a board, I need to fill out this petition. But each one of those things needs to be a manifestation of your vision.
Yep.
Right. And, I must have received over 100 grant denial emails back in my nonprofit.
Easily.
Yeah, it's scourging. And most of the time they're generic emails. You don't even get feedback. Like
no name
to do with you. Yeah. It's like
it's like, hey, applicant.
Yeah. And it's just one of those things where it's like, to your point, you have to build up that thick skin, because the biggest challenge for any founder, I always believe, and I'm curious if you agree with this, is for me, it's always been the psychological side, the doubt. Like that's the toughest part. The other things you could figure out how to, make a schedule or make a budget, but the doubt, right? Like that's always there.
That's what I was saying. Like, you have to become so okay with being told no. You have to become so okay with, I don't see the vision. You have to become so okay and really taking that feedback to tweaking it to making it stronger, but not changing who you are. And that's the part that's really delicate, because that feedback is valuable, right? Like when you do get told no, that's important, because now you can either say, okay, I see why I was told no. I didn't articulate this vision well. I didn't articulate our mission well. I didn't articulate, what we're actually doing well. Or you could go into a place of, I have to change this. I have to change this. Those are two different responses, right? Like if I'm able to take that feedback and make something stronger and make something better, that's very different from me taking that feedback and changing. So you have to constantly know, where are you taking feedback? How personal are you taking it? And does that founder and does that group, does that whatever actually align? Because some people simply won't. You
Yeah.
know, like
Right.
when I start talking about Black and brown communities and the disparities that's happening, that really just might rub people the wrong way. I cannot shift from that conversation. The
Mm-hmm.
minute I shift from that conversation, I have now started to alter GLA and our identity. That's not, we didn't come into this with that in mind. We came in it for this reason, for Black and brown communities in Atlanta, underserved communities. So if that offends someone or if that doesn't land well with someone, that's okay. And you
Right.
have
It's
to
not for them.
genuinely just
Yeah.
be okay with that. So it is, it gets lonely because, you know, it's hard
Yeah.
work. But that psychological piece is huge. You have to learn how to doubt yourself and still write a charter application and look at your
Yeah.
words like, do I actually believe this? And
Yeah.
then,
It's all about that, man. It's because, and the extent that you believe it rubs off on anybody you talk to
mm,
too. If you don't believe what you're selling, whatever it is, people will sense that,
yeah,
and then it's a cycle. So I want to close out with one final question about the future of education. I was mentioning before we started recording here that we're really trying at Terra, we're trying to get people to think longer term and actually put real ideas out there. And so when you look 10 years ahead from now, 2032, what's something that you hope is true just about K-12 education? It can be small, it can be big, but 10 years out, where do you hope the system has gotten to, at least in some measure of progress?
okay. Um, how much time I have? I really just want to share one thing
Please, yeah,
about
all time in
and
the world.
tie in GLA. So there's two things that happen with GLA. We're a leadership academy, and then we also refer to ourselves as the School of Curious Minds.
I saw that, yeah.
And that stems from this idea that curiosity is typically killed in education
Right.
around third, fourth grade, because that's when we start the standardized testing, right? That's what I genuinely believe. Students come in K through 1, 2, and they love school. They enjoy going to school. And then about third or fourth grade, I don't like school. And that's because teachers, and that's no fault of teachers, again, that's a systems thing. Teachers are like,
Yeah.
I don't have time for you to be curious and be all over this place. I got to get you ready for this exam at the end of the year. So the
Right.
curiosity is typically killed. The issue that I have with that is that curiosity breeds innovation, right? So
Yeah.
anything that we have that's innovative, it comes from someone continuously asking the question, what if?
Yeah.
What if we were able to have a meeting and not be in person? What if
Right.
we were able to text and not have to pick up the phone? What if we wanted to get somewhere faster and not drive a car? You got planes. What if we wanted to see someone and not be on the phone? You get FaceTime, right? Like all of these innovations that we have stem from someone asking the question, what if? And someone being able or willing to break and bend rules a little bit.
Yeah.
So I say all of that to say is that education should be a place where students are able to stay curious. And you'll see us say that all throughout GLA. We're going to push people staying curious because curiosity breeds innovation. The minute you start to kill that curiosity, nothing new happens, right? We're going to perpetuate and continue to keep things going. So in the year of 2032, I believe that, and I would like to see an education system where curiosity is encouraged at every level. And I think standardized testing, if that was to happen, standardized testing would have to go away in some form or fashion, because that within itself doesn't push curiosity. It doesn't help students get to the next. It's just not.
Right.
And I, as a school leader, like that rubs people the wrong way when I say that. Like I'm just not a proponent of standardized testing. I understand it's a part of the game. It's a part of the process. But in the year 2032, I really genuinely hope we have figured out a way to push curiosity and push students and education to a place to where we can get new things happening.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. And I mean, I 100% agree. I love the what if questions. I think the first blog post I ever wrote for Terra was called What If? for the same reason, right? It's like, we got to get people thinking differently here. And to your point, the system as itself, as it stands now, we don't even talk, like the fact that you're referencing innovation when you're talking about, fourth graders, for instance. It's like, we need to paint that picture for people. It's like, these are people, our kids are the ones who are going to grow up and be the leaders. Like, we all say it, but what does that actually mean?
Exactly.
Right, if you take that seriously, then you have to engender a sense of curiosity and a sense of empowerment, that you actually are someone capable of changing things and how they're done. And as a country that loves to say how innovative we are, and we are, but let's be real, like a lot of times recently, immigrants come in and they spur a lot of innovation, which is fantastic. But at the same time, like our system, we won't see the effects of our standardized test-driven system. I guess we are seeing it now with the labor market and everything. But
we see it now.
Yeah, it's like, it's only going to get more like that if we don't change course. Because if we focus on, all right, well, success means passing this test and getting this credential, but it's like, okay, well, what kind of people are we cultivating here, right?
Exactly. And that's the leadership parts that come into the school, right? Because in schools we were trained to be workers. It's go to school, go to college, get a 9 to 5, pay your bills, die, and be happy a little bit in the mix.
You can fit it in, yeah.
But it's not genuinely, we're not really taught like, this is how you be a leader, this is how you run a business, this is how you do, like, we communities of colors, we're just not taught that. That's something that we have to scratch at and prove that we deserve to be in these spaces, and prove we deserve to be in these roles, and scratch to be in these rooms. And now I don't think that is a mistake. I think it's intentional. I think it's the way we were educated. I think that's why experiences, when I hear you talking about what students are being exposed to, what they have an opportunity to experience, is life-changing. Because if I never see this, I don't know that I could be this. And that sounds so cliche, and it sounds so small, but it's genius when you intentionally keep a certain group of people away from a certain opportunity. And you see the dynamic that happens when you do that. And you also see the change that starts to happen when you do expose students to those opportunities. So that's why we go into our vision, like, we're here to provide a quality and intentional educational experience, because everything that we do, everything that we say, is intentional to prepare this next generation of innovators, our next generation of thinkers, our next generation of lawyers, doctors, educators. It's all intentional to prepare them for a new world, because we can't do that because we don't see it. They do. So our job is to cultivate and support them in that process. And that's why we have the inquiry-based model. You are in control of your education, and we're going to facilitate that and help and support that, as opposed to always trying to dispel and regurgitate this information on you. I'm sorry. Sometimes I get carried away, man. I'm so passionate.
That is why you are a founder. I mean, that's what makes the difference, right? And there's no strict time limit on these interviews, so I'm happy we could talk all day about this. And I think I just, I want to applaud you and anyone who's watching. Like, this is what leadership takes. It takes going on that limb, being that first person, and standing by that and saying, you know what, I think this is a path that we should explore. I'm going to lead. Who's ever going to follow me down it? You don't have to be a part of that, but here's why I'm doing it, and I'm actually going to do it. I think to your point, there's a lot of folks who end up starting organizations, schools, whatever. They think, or they say it's because of a mission or a vision, but it ends up being because they just want to run it. With school and education where it is, we don't need more of that, obviously. We need people really pushing our thinking. So I applaud you for that. I'm very excited to see what happens with GLA. Obviously, if there's any way we can support, let me know. We will be posting more details about Antonio's research that's gone into the model in the blog post. So if you're more curious about how they're going to really structure GLA, please check that out. This has been a fantastic conversation. This makes me want to start a whole different series about the future of education, honestly. We might do that. But Antonio, thanks so much again. This has been great.
Yeah, thank you, man. I appreciate it. And thank you to everyone that's watching.
Yeah, so check them out, and live on our website, our YouTube channel, and we'll see everybody soon.